House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announces the managers of the impeachment trial. And our question today is...
Scott, wait, hold on 1 second. Sorry to bother you. I was reading something.
This is the lead-in to the show, Bill.
I know. I was just reading something yesterday. It was really important. It was an advertising study that said that usually people won't act on something until they hear it like 7 times, repeated 7 times. So I just wanted to cut in to say, we're going on a cruise. 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 We're going on a cruise, and we're going on a cruise. That ought to sell it out.
And the link is in the description below. That may explain why I just got my 8th text from my wife asking if I'd taken out the garbage. So...
Sorry to interrupt. Please continue. I had said nothing.
That's no problem. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, which we've now heard at least 7 times in the last week, Nancy Pelosi has announced the names of the 7 managers. I saw Jeffrey Toobin, the legal expert on CNN, gushing over the fact that there were 4 men, 3 women, 1 Latina, 2 black people, and it's a very different Democratic Party from the last time around. That they did an impeachment process. But Bill, because events develop so rapidly in these things, the vote is still going to have to go to the House to accept these managers, as well as to officially transmit, or as the term Nancy Pelosi used was, to march these charges over to the Senate. As all that's happening, and having had multiple conversations with you on this topic and realizing how you feel about it, and also how the other half of the country feels about it, or at least those represented by the Democrats in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, I began wondering, Bill, if there are any constitutional reforms that ought to be proposed to fend off the possibility of future, what you would see as sham impeachment proceedings, proceedings that are really not intended to accomplish any kind of constitutional purpose, but rather to score points at the ballot box, or at least to muck up the wheels of progress for the sitting administration. Bill, does it seem to you that there is a constitutional remedy, perhaps, for this kind of problem, since you have previously said it's going to come up over and over again now that it's come up this time?
My experience in reading the history of this country shows that every time you try to improve the Constitution, you make it much, much worse, and introduce some new flaw unexpectedly that does much more damage than whatever it was you were trying to contain. There is no legal flaw, and there's no structural flaw in what's happening now. There's an enormous moral flaw, and I think a catastrophic political flaw, but the actual mechanism, you could certainly make an attempt to change it, but I really don't like touching those 4,440 words at all. So I would say no to that. And before we talk about some possible options, I just want to say, when you say Nancy Pelosi's going to march, when Nancy Pelosi says she's going to march these over to the Senate, she can in fact march them to the Senate, but she can't march them through the Senate. And this kind of big talk is exactly the kind of bluster I've come to expect from these creatures. And as far as the diversity of the crowd goes, I think from now on, any diversity question, anytime diversity comes up, I'm gonna just go with what Ricky Gervais said at the Golden Globes thing, when he said he was asked to read a retrospective of all the actors that they'd lost during the previous year, and he said he wasn't going to do it. The list wasn't diverse enough.
Maybe next year.
So yeah, maybe next year. So look, the only answer to this is, again, you don't have to fix the system. The system is being misused, but the system works. I think the best response to this, I really do, and apparently we don't have the votes for this, would be to have her march them over to the Senate. Mitch McConnell takes them, he disappears, and 5 minutes later he says the Senate has agreed to simply what's the word I'm looking for? Dismiss. We're dismissing these charges. And we're going to continue to dismiss charges that come to us, no matter what, speaking as Republicans or whoever. We think the Senate should dismiss any charges that come to the Senate on impeachment that are absolutely partisan, that have essentially no participation from the other party whatsoever. That alone is an indication of how, if you'll pardon the expression, trumped up these charges are. And And that's the only answer, I think, to fix this is to not only to dismiss it with all of the scorn and just general contempt that it deserves. But if you do that once or twice, then people like Nancy Pelosi will realize that this little piece of legerdemain that destroys our faith in government and our institutions, not only destroys our faith in government, which is that's not a bug, that's a feature for the left, but also costs you big time politically. And I think that's about the only way to solve this kind of nonsense, is to have it not work.
Well, to which you might want to answer your own self and say, if only. I mean,
I was right, whatever I said.
We gave the House of Representatives, as a country, we gave the House of Representatives to the Democrats after we elected President Trump. And if you look at the history of the electoral process and who holds the White House, who holds the House and the Senate, you'll see that this just keeps seesawing back and forth. So, Bill, your suggestion that there may be no structural or procedural remedy to this seems to damn us to a perpetual series of sham impeachments from now here to eternity.
No, I think you might have missed the point. If the charges are dismissed on Donald Trump and it doesn't work, it ends up blowing up in their face, there's a data point. If they try to do it again and they have the House and the Senate and the presidency and they want to push, this is the worst case scenario that you're just referencing. They want to push through an impeachment. Well, see, they couldn't have the presidency, right? Because they'd have to have the House and the Senate in order to remove the president, and it's not likely to be a Democratic president. So if you're telling me that the worst case in the future is that a democratically controlled House sends articles of impeachment that have no merit to a democratically controlled Senate, which then votes to remove that president from office, then if the American people don't rise up in response to this coup, then we get what we deserve. But I have no doubt whatsoever that if it turned out that a Republican president was impeached and then actually removed from office by the Senate based on the thinness of the charges, non-existence of the charges that are leveled against President Trump, I think the American people would pretty quickly decide, okay, fine. He's been impeached. He's been removed from office. He's our candidate for the next presidential election, and we're going to put him back. And we're going to show these miserable cowards who can't win legitimately, who lost an election because people don't want what they're selling, that this back of the hand kind of, do-over, delay, slow down, slander, this whole thing just doesn't work. It's costing you votes. Everybody says that the next election, this election is the most important election of our lifetime. It's not. 2020 is not the most important election of our lifetime. 2016 was the most important election of our lifetime. And unless something dramatic happens, it will remain the most important election of my lifetime anyway. But if it turns out that in 2020, that this kind of thing works to the degree that either Trump is defeated by a Democrat, which seems awfully unlikely to me given the Democrats, or that the Senate flips and then they go ahead with these impeachment proceedings, which, if I understand correctly, Scott, you know more about this than I do, in your role of mild-mannered liberal reporter deep underneath your super patriot Scott Ott constitutional whiz. It seems to me that if Nancy Pelosi brings these charges that she's already had passed through the House and she marches them over to the Senate and the Senate votes on this, goes to trial and says, acquitted, then even if they did take the Senate in 2020 and Donald Trump remained president, they would have to bring new articles against him. Is that right? They wouldn't be able to just dust off the old ones that they'd had before, would they?
Well, theoretically, yes, they would have to bring new charges. Now, slight edits.
Having been acquitted of the previous charges.
Slight edits, because there's no real, I don't think there's a double jeopardy provision in the Constitution when it comes to impeachment, simply because it's not really a legal proceeding. It's more
I understand
of a quasi-legal political proceeding. But Bill, the phrase that you use back there is what has me worried. The phrase where you essentially suggested that if there isn't a ballot box backlash against this kind of sham impeachment proceeding, then we get what we deserve. That's my concern, Bill. That we're going to get what we deserve, and that we'll get it again, and we'll keep getting it until it can't be got anymore, and we have some other form of government.
Well, I hate to be the person to disillusion you, but that statement that people get the government they deserve is absolutely true. And if it turns out
so that's saying you deserve this, Bill, not those people out there who didn't do what you thought they should do.
No,
you
on the
deserve
contrary.
it.
No, on the contrary. If it turns out, look, if I didn't believe this, and I believe this based on almost uncountable historical precedents, but if I didn't believe this, I'd be a progressive. If it turns out that all of this happens, that Donald Trump's defeated in 2020 as a result of the impeachment thing, that the Democrats sweep the House and then impeach Donald Trump and remove him from office, all of that. If that actually happens, if we allow that to happen, then we will get the government that we deserve. We'll get a government of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and the Obama clan and all of that. We will get that, and we will continue to suffer under that until we either learn the errors of our ways, or we will continue to suffer until we do. And that is how the world works. What the reason our society is so silly, because it's just silly. It's just gotten to be a joke. It's just frivolous, superfluous, just frothy nonsense, is because of its success, because it's been so blindingly successful in terms of security and economic prosperity. We can afford to be this stupid. But if it turns out that this, and this is the cycle of civilizations, and it has been throughout history, and while I think there's one or two things about this current cycle that are unique in history and give me some hope for the future, nevertheless, we would certainly not be the first nor the last civilization to simply fritter away its freedoms and its power and all of its benefits and all of its glories, because we became so accustomed to them that we assumed that they were just built into the structure of the world, when everybody who studies this knows that they're not.
I guess the real test of this process and how the voters feel about it really will come after a senatorial cycle or two, because the Senate doesn't turn over as rapidly as the House does, where every 2 years everybody's up for re-election. And so, the Senate stayed in the hands of Republicans last time around because only a third of those seats were up. But the American public in their isolated communities around the country gave that majority to the Democrats. I suppose it may be, if it continues in this manner, no matter which party dominates which house, essentially it's the American people saying, you people go off there to that little district 10 miles square and you play with each other, and we'll continue to carry out our lives while you pretend you're doing very important work and not getting anywhere.
Who's in this camp, the left or the right?
I'm just saying either side. I think the American people. I think the American people are basically saying, "Look, okay, I'll tell you what. This time around, House Democrat, Senate Republican, White House Republican, and just go.
I got it.
Go play around."
Look, if I didn't believe in the collective, this is the only time I ever use the word collective with any kind of positive connotation, only because I mean it in terms of an action, not a collective in the sense of a group of people, so much as a collective in terms of individual citizens being polled and so on. If I didn't believe in the collective wisdom of the American people, then I wouldn't believe in this form of government at all. And I have not yet been disappointed. I've had some scares, but that's in fact the reason our government was designed the way it was, as you pointed out so beautifully in your Freedom's Charter series back at the previous establishment. The entire genius of so much genius in the Constitution, but one of the most important things that keeps the country lubricated is the fact that political change can happen very quickly. I mean, official change. Every 2 years, you could simply sweep the entire House. You could have 435 new members in a year, every 2 years rather, if the country was so inclined. But the Senate specifically is designed not only to have longer terms, but to have staggered terms. The Senate is kind of the dead man's switch if the country goes mad and tries to take whatever particular popular insanity that people and crowds of people are prone to. The entire point of the Senate was to slow it down, not make it immovable, but slow it down because the popular mood of any people throughout history can often become swayed by demagogues or ideologies or whatever the case may be. So when I say I depend on the wisdom of the American people, I don't just depend on the wisdom of the founders. I depend on the wisdom of the voters. And if it turns out that that the American voters decide to go down this progressive path, then that will be for two reasons. One, because of the success that we've had. In other words, they're socialists only because they live in a capitalist country. And when they get their socialism and all of these things like iPads and stuff goes away and they get to sit in the health clinic for 2 or 3 days waiting for care, then they'll either change their ways or they'll continue. Either way, we'll get what we deserve. But I don't think that that's at the point we're at yet. I think I want to close with something that's important. I think one of the reasons why this is so alarming is because the left has moved so far to the left. Actually, they haven't moved so much as they've just admitted it. But now the choices are very clear. Now we're talking about open choice between a socialist candidate and then slightly less socialist candidates on the Democratic side, and a guy who is doing his best to basically restore America in his own way, which I think is somewhat personally flawed, but which is nevertheless being pretty successful. So the choice becomes clearer now between left and right, between Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives. And when I said that I trust the American people, the reason that I have confidence in the American people in a way that I didn't 3-4 years ago is because, as our friend Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream of culture. And when I look at what's happening in the headwaters, what I see is that progressive ideals, progressive messages, progressive themes, and progressive narratives have been injected into the pop culture via Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Terminator. We go on and on and on and on and on. They have, like this parasite wasp, buried their progressive message inside beloved social stories, beloved myths of our time. And what we see is not the American people saying, well, I guess it's time for us to change our minds and believe what they are selling us. But we find people, and I mean everybody, walking away from these things that are so dear to them rather than endure them infused with progressive messages, which are usually the antithesis of what they loved in the first place. So all I'm saying is this. If it turned out that all of these woke, look, I can simplify this. Let's just get it off of Star Wars. If it turned out that the Gillette ad had came out and said that men are fundamentally flawed, basically said you're all potential rapists, you're just going to have to be better. And it's going to go from as close, what is it? It's as close as a shave as it doesn't matter.
The best a man can get.
The best that a man can get, right? The best shave that a man can get to the best man that a man can get, something like that. Who knows?
And then it was the best a man can be or something like that.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So they make this commercial. And they are going to basically say, we're going to try and include all of these woke progressives because they're going to need to shave too. First of all, I'm not convinced that's the case. But secondly, they're convinced by ad agencies, by marketing people, and mostly by their own super liberal politics, driven by the fact that the people making the decisions are multimillionaires who live in isolation from the real world. In any event, Gillette went with the woke approach. And as a result of one commercial, Gillette lost $8 billion in revenue and will likely never recover. So if it turns out that Gillette had run with this woke message and sales had increased, I'd be buying beans and bacon right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful for the opportunity to have these conversations before you and through you to the world, because we know that you are sharing these messages with others from our website at billwhittle.com, which has those social sharing opportunities. We also look forward to meeting many of you aboard the Navigator of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean ship that's going to be on a 3-night cruise to the Bahamas with a stay for a day on a private island called Coco Cay. Wow, that was almost poetic. And we want you to be part of that. If you have not yet reserved your cabin, go to billwhittlecruise.com and make sure you get that set up today. It's going to be great to be doing live productions of Bill Whittle Now, as well as Right Angle and other shows that we do here, and have other kinds of sort of formal projects or experiences, but also just the informal conversation that you'll be able to have not only with the hosts of these shows, but also with your fellow members, fans, and friends. We look forward to having you as part of that. Bill, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, Scott, that you're absolutely right. But if you haven't already bought your ticket, no number of people already have. I think, Scott, your message is going to just bounce off of anybody who's still listening, unless you say Bill Whittle Cruise 7 times. Then the repetitive effect of advertising: BillWhittleCruise.com, 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 and now you and I can finish this recording and watch the floodgates of revenue simply open.
To paraphrase a commercial, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Did I misunderstand something?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we know you've heard it enough from us, and your fellow members are excited to be joining us shipboard for fun and laughter and luxury and relaxation, lots of good food and the occasional drink. And my wife has made me promise that there will be some sort of singing, and we don't have a band or anything, so I guess we're just
Scott Ott is a great singer. He's a great singer.
So we're just going to do it kind of, perhaps we'll do some singing a cappella, because I can't stand karaoke. In any case, BillWhittleCruise.com is where you go to find out more about that. If you are not yet a member at BillWhittle.com, just go there and click that Become a Member link. Thanks to our buddies over at the Patriot Post, America's News Digest, for helping to fund this enterprise, as well as our pals at Patreon.com/BillWhittle, who just got a new video from Bill yesterday as we record this on the 15th today. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.